Welcome to our 2022 Spring Seminar Program. I want to acknowledge not only that this has been a very difficult year to be a teacher with COVID-19 and everything else that's going on, but we're beginning the third year of it being a difficult year. And I'm having to make the same speech every time. So forgive me for being repetitive. It's as painful for me as it is for you. However, the program you're about to start provides a place of rejuvenation, maybe escape is a better word, from the difficulties of teaching under COVID-19 and the rigors of life in the school district of Philadelphia in general. How is this professional development program different? Well, we have a focus on content. You learn cutting edge information from a university researcher who's an expert in their field, and then bring it to your students by incorporating into a curriculum unit. These units motivate students to learn by giving them knowledge that's relevant to their lives. They also give teachers greater confidence in their mastery of subject matter. In fact, TIP Fellows have created more than 600 units since 2006 when we began. We publish the units online and you share that work with teachers all over the world. Now, it all starts with you as a teacher. You choose a topic that is relevant to your students' learning needs. You work independently. You can tailor your reading list and research agenda to your teaching goals. And as teachers, you can work with your seminar leader to modify the seminar content to suit your interests. The collegial atmosphere makes TIP unique. As a fellow in the program, and we call our participants fellows, you'll share information with your colleagues about how best to deliver that new knowledge to your students. You have a chance to debate and discuss your topic with your peers. And one of the fellows tell me that the lively discussion in their seminar is the best part of TIP. Especially now, when you're under strain from COVID-19, you'll get ideas about how to keep up your morale, and students' morale during this uncertain time. You'll have to write a rigorous curriculum unit, but we're here to help. Each seminar has a seminar coordinator, an experienced fellow who helps with classroom management, and someone you can go to if you need help writing your unit. Your seminar leader is accessible. We ask that they meet at least twice one-on-one with you to guide you in writing your unit, and especially in the content part. And now I want to acknowledge the people who are making this unique program possible. Since we began in 2006, the Penn Provost Office has been behind us, supporting us financially and giving us the space and organizational staff time we need to run the program. We're fortunate today to have Interim Provost Beth Winkelstein with us to speak about Penn's commitment to TIP. Dr. Winkelstein.
Thanks, Edward, and welcome to everybody on the Zoom call. Obviously, we wish we could be together in person, but Omicron continues to keep us on our toes. And as a scientist who does PCR, it's a little close to home. But we're all on the screens, and I want to welcome members of our 2022 TIP cohort. At least the benefit to being on Zoom is that we can see everybody's unmasked faces, which for me brings it alive a little bit more than it would otherwise. At the risk of stating the obvious, this has been an immensely challenging 2 years for educators, as Edward has already reminded us, and the phrase building the bike while we ride it often comes up. You can pick your mode of transportation. We've heard the analogy a number of different ways, but among many of the other pandemic lessons, the more we learn, the more we understand the absolutely critical role that teachers play in the lives of young people. And pivoting to remote teaching and learning, and then pivoting to in-person, and then pivoting back has been more than a little dizzying for everyone, but most particularly for teachers. There's still a fundamental truth, though, about education, which is great students are inspired by great teachers, and great teachers are always learning. The Teachers Institute is guided by these fundamental principles. Effective pedagogy can be learned, and it can be taught. This is the Institute's mission, and Penn is honored and proud to have supported TIP since its founding 16 years ago. We have some outstanding members of the faculty lined up, and I hope and expect that they will push you to think about your own teaching in new and different and exciting ways. You'll learn about cancer biology and treatment, democracy and civic participation, Black artists and visual expression, and one more close to my own background because I'm an engineer, soft robots. Before I finish up, let me add one last thing to all of you educators who are joining us, and that's my thanks. Thank you for your work each and every day, preparing our young people to succeed. We're so appreciative of your efforts, and I wish you all the best as you begin this year's program. And so now I'm thrilled to return it to Edward, and I'm going to stay on for a little bit if that's okay with you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Winkelstein. We couldn't do this without the School District of Philadelphia's support. It's a relationship that works to our mutual benefit. The district helps promote TIP. We provide curriculum units that teach district, state, and national curriculum standards. This year, I'm pleased to say that the school district has invited TIP fellows to workshop their units at Tune Up Tuesday events. Mira is somebody I've been working with for quite a while, since I started this job in 2017, and she's been a great partner and really helped in our effort to expand this program and bring it to more teachers. So Meredith, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see some new faces and some familiar faces that I know from lots of other interactions that we've had. It's awesome to be able to be a part of this. And I was just messaging with one of the folks here today. I'm like, oh my God, all of these topics look so interesting. How do you even go about choosing them? But I think I talked about this last year. It's with all of this going on, I think this speaks volumes about each of you and the way in which you care for yourselves and your own learning, to be able to still find a way to locate the time to do this during a time where everything just takes 10 times longer because it keeps changing and it feels 8 times harder. But it just says so much about your commitment to your own development to be here and to be creating the time for this. So on my team, we give this survey. It's called the Q12. And it's from Gallup, and it's a series of 12 questions that kind of gets at the overall health of the team. And one of the questions that some of my team members make fun of me for is, do you have a best friend at work? They're like, work isn't where I have my best friend. I already have one. We went to high school together. We went to college together. I'm good. And over the past year or two, we've found folks thinking about that question a little bit differently about, do I have a best friend at work? I joke with my friend Michael that I work with, like, he is my work husband. He is my best friend at work. I don't survive without him. He doesn't survive without me. And those types of relationships form because folks come together around areas of interest who are like-minded, but also think differently and push one another's thinking. And I hope that this group is potentially a way for each of you to find that best friend at work, that person who is your critical friend, who will check you when you need to be checked, who will push you when you just need that extra oomph to take a risk, and the person that you can just kind of call or text because you just need a little bit of encouragement. But it's opportunities like this that I think allow folks to find potentially that lifelong friend at work that professionally helps them keep it going during even the toughest times. And so I really deeply hope that in addition to leaving here with tremendous content knowledge that you're going to be developing in the sessions as you learn from one another, but you also leave with a professional relationship that can kind of live outside of just TIP and hopefully have a lasting impact on your work in the next year, but also in the next 10 years. I think if anything, the past few years have shown us how important those relationships are truly as a lifeline to do this important work. So I'm so excited to hear more about the work that you'll be doing over the next couple of months and to see some of the curriculum units that come out of it. So thank you as always for having me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Meredith. And I didn't give Meredith a proper introduction before. She is Deputy Chief in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And she's been helping to organize those Tune-Up Tuesday events that I talked about earlier. So we're certainly grateful for that. Now I would like to introduce this fall's seminars, their leaders and their coordinators. Each seminar leader will say a few words about what they are teaching. And we'll start with the seminar, Taking Up the Mantle, African-American Women Writers After Morrison. This one is led by Herman Beavers, Professor of English and Africana Studies at Penn. And this is the 6th seminar that Herman has led with TIP. He is a previous University Advisory Co-Chair, and the coordinator in that seminar is Karen Brinkley. So Herman, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Edward. It's a pleasure to be here. So one might ask the question, why teach a course on African-American women writers after Toni Morrison? Why not a seminar that focuses on Toni Morrison? We would certainly have lots to talk about. She's written 11 novels and several books of essays, and there's tons of criticism on Toni Morrison's work. Why should we focus, one might ask, on writers whose work is not necessarily considered exemplary or written by people whose names are not household names? Now, I will say some of the writers that we'll be reading in the seminar have won some of the most important literary prizes to be won, including the Pulitzer Prize for Best Play and the Flannery O'Connor and Ken Faulkner Award for Fiction. So these are not people that should be dismissed as writers. But let me say, as a Toni Morrison scholar myself, I've asked myself the question, why would you want to teach a course on writers after Morrison? Why don't you just make it easy on yourself and lead discussions on books that you've read and written about? And the answer to that question is, I'm a literary historian and a literary critic. And what I know is that how we came to consider Toni Morrison a major American writer did not happen overnight. And it didn't happen, with her winning the Nobel Prize. There were other things that needed to happen for her to become important. And so what I really think is that at some point in time, a secondary school teacher decided that she wanted to see change in the curriculum, and she elected to teach a Toni Morrison novel. And we've been talking about Toni Morrison ever since. I am teaching a Toni Morrison survey to undergraduates this semester. When I asked them how many of them had read Toni Morrison novels prior to taking my class, just about all of the hands went up. So she's pretty well established in the canon. But here's what we know. What we know is that Toni Morrison would not have become more visible on the American literary scene if we had not had 3 events that really sort of set the stage for her to come into the foreground. One is the Black Power movement and thereby the Black protest movement, where folks came into, Black folks were in the streets protesting for increased citizenship and a more central place in the American story. The other thing is second wave feminism. If women hadn't decided that they wanted to assert themselves and step out of the shadow of men, and in this case, have Black women step into that conversation and say, our stories are are just as important as white women's stories. And finally, Black women asserting the importance of their stories in terms of the Black experience. Prior to 1970, when Morrison comes on the scene, if you talk about the Black experience, you more than likely were talking about Black male experience. In fact, Black cisgender male experience. One of the reasons why I decided to teach this course, this seminar, is because one, I wanted to expose people to writers who are writing in the wake of Morrison and building on her legacy. Two, I have to say, one of my main motivations for teaching literature has always been, I teach the books that I want to read. And sometimes those are books that I don't have any experience reading prior to walking into the class. And so in many ways, in this instance, I'm a fellow traveler with the people in my seminar, not an expert. And I like those kind of situations. And then the other thing is, and this is really important, one of the things that I realized is that Toni Morrison gets a tremendous amount of critical attention. People write about Toni Morrison all the time. There's the Toni Morrison criticism is voluminous, particularly post Beloved. But that has its downside, which is, I think that a lot of people among the majority said, well, you know, I'm writing about Toni Morrison because there are no other African-American writers worth writing about who are as important as she is. As a friend of mine would say, that's kind of racist. And so by virtue of that, there are all of these African-American female writers that don't get any critical attention. That is to our detriment. And so one of the reasons why I'm teaching this seminar is because it occurred to me in 2019, after Morrison passed, we have to get down to the business of finding out who are the writers coming after Morrison, and we have to make our own arguments about why they're important. Because not to do so is to, if we think about it in quantitative terms, is to really keep us in the same place that we were when we were focusing on Richard Wright, James Baldwin, and Ralph Ellison, where we kind of choose these main writers who talk about the Black experience at the expense of everybody else. We have to do something different. But finally, the most important reason I think might be this, which is that we are in this moment where state legislatures are passing laws banning the teaching of what is called critical race theory. Now, we can go back and forth about what that is. You know, I think we're pretty sure that we really don't teach critical race theory in secondary schools, but conservatives, particularly people who are conservative and of the extreme right persuasion, they want to find a way to take us back to an understanding of American history and American culture and American literary history as this thing that was produced only by white people. We cannot go back to that. And so one of the things that I really want to sort of focus on over the course of our time together is, what are the politics of teaching African-American women writers post-Morrison? And what kind of strategies do we need to develop to make sure that these writers get taught, even as they sort of exist in a pretty hostile environment right now?
The next seminar is Asian Americans in U.S. Schools. That one will be led by Kimberly Goyette, professor of sociology at Temple, and the coordinator is Emma Connolly. Professor Goyette.
Sure. I actually was really thrilled to be following Professor Beavers. I was just thinking, oh, I hope I'm next. Because I think, although the content is a bit different, I think largely our motivations and some of our overarching themes are going to be somewhat similar. So again, thinking about the question of why Asian Americans, and then particularly why Asian Americans in the US, certainly the first answer to that question is, I think that Asian American history and Asian American issues in the US have been neglected. There isn't a lot of content on them. It's not something that we've spent a ton of time talking about. So that's a portion of why I like this course. So we'll be spending some time in this course, certainly talking about history, the immigration to the US and how immigration policy has shaped who has been allowed to come and who has not been allowed to come, and how that shapes trajectories once Asian Americans come to the US. Why Asian Americans in education? Well, one of the reasons is because I love studying education. Another reason is I think it gives us a lens to really look at how Asian Americans have been defined in the US, and particularly how they've been racialized. And I think that racialization will also sort of transcends just Asian Americans. We'll be talking about racialization as it has happened through immigration policy, but also how it happens in schools, or how, and the tensions that that causes in schools for students, for teachers, for educational experiences. What does it mean to be called a model minority? And what does it mean to other groups to have a group being labeled as a model minority? What does that look like for our racial relations as a country, in schools, outside of schools? What does it mean to have tiger parents? What does that say about how Asian Americans are perceived, but also how other groups are perceived? What does it mean to be overachievers? All of those things, I think, shine a particularly interesting lens on how we conceive of race in the US. So a lot of this course, though very much about the Asian American experience and the Asian American experience in schools, is also about racialization and how race gets defined, how it gets changed, how that can be problematic even when the racialization is positive. So what are the consequences of this racialization? And of course, and as you all have lived through in COVID and hopefully moving into post-COVID times, the very different ways that Asian Americans have been blamed for this disease has also become part of racialization. So how these notions of merit and blame shift with circumstance, that's something that we'll take a deep dive into in this class. I do want to say one of my absolute pleasures in teaching these classes, I teach a sociology of education class for undergrads and graduate students at Temple. When I teach a sociology of education class with graduate students, I often get people who are professionals who are working in education, teachers sometimes, teachers in secondary schools sometimes, teachers who are working to get more advanced credentials. And the wonderful thing about this class is that you all bring so much to this class. It's one thing to have the content. The content is great, and I hope that I'll give you some nice stimulating content, but really you add so much to it by bringing that content to life material from your classes. So I think our discussions are going to be phenomenal. If my past experience with these classes is any indication, we're going to have some really great discussions. And again, I hope, like Karen mentioned in Professor Beaver's class, we're going to have a nice sort of safe and welcoming space to have those discussions that may be challenging in some ways, but hopefully we'll be able to create that trust that we need to do that. And as Edward mentioned, Emma Connolly is our coordinator. So I'm really grateful to be working with Emma. This is my first year, so I am happy to take suggestions and feedback. And I will listen very carefully to what you have to say, since I am learning too. But I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be looking at this.
Thank you, Professor Goyette. The next seminar is Educating for American Democracy, led by Roger Smith, Professor of Political Science at Penn. This is Roger's third seminar with TIP, and he was also University Advisory Co-Chair for a number of years. The coordinator of that seminar is Tim Woods, and now I'll turn it over to Rogers.
Thank you, Edward. I'm thrilled to re-engage with TIP, and in the role that I enjoy and value the most, that of seminar leader. The seminar is Educating for American Democracy, and it does reflect the fact that as a political scientist, I've been concerned about how effectively we educate people to be democratic citizens throughout my career. And I think that we educate people to be effective democratic citizens, not just in our courses on history and social studies and civics, but actually all through the curriculum when they're learning the science related to the environment. They're being prepared to be critical thinkers on some of the most important issues of our time. When they are learning literature, the kind of voices that are represented and the kinds of ways they are presented are vital to civic education, as Herman has already indicated. And he called attention to something that has made this seminar seem all the more significant in my mind over the past year. And that is the fact that the public schools are now ground zero for intense political warfare. And many conservative activists believe that they're going to ride the crusade against critical race theory to a return to power at the national, state, and local levels throughout the country. They're excited about that, and it's accompanied by a lot of attacks on the way that public school teachers are teaching about America's history, principles, and political struggles. Those attacks often are part of efforts to get people to abandon the public schools and move to different kinds of privatized education. This is a critical time for all those topics, and those of us who care about public education and who believe that America's teachers on the whole have been doing a terrific job under challenging circumstances. We face the challenge now of showing that we can educate for American democracy effectively and in a way that is fair, intellectually honest, and representative of the diverse voices and experiences that really have constituted American life. Now, for the last few years, I've been part of several initiatives concerned with this problem, and in particular, the Educating for American Democracy initiative that was formed by a set of groups that got NEH funding. It's an initiative that brought together higher education faculty with K through 12 teachers and also administrators from throughout the country, with liberals and conservatives involved. And the product of that multi-year effort was not a standard curriculum that everyone should teach. It was instead a roadmap that lays out 7 themes that are central to civic education in our time, and that discusses how we try and present these in an intellectually honest and rigorous way that does justice to the variety of perspectives and experiences in American life. And the Educating for American Democracy initiative has begun accumulating lots and lots of resources, primary sources, secondary sources, lesson plans that are curated for quality and are available to teachers to use to try to teach effectively and in ways that can stand up to the often harsh political scrutiny that they get from all sides in this particular political moment. So I've structured the Educating for American Democracy seminar around these 7 themes, spending a couple weeks on each. And I've populated it with readings from the Educating for American Democracy website. I've drawn on the resources that they've already provided and not the kinds of materials that I would usually present on my own. I do think that there are a lot of outstanding resources there, but looking at them, it also underlined for me that an aspiration I had from the start is certainly imperative. And that aspiration was that not only would the Educating for American Democracy initiative be something that could assist Philadelphia teachers, I've also hoped all along that Philadelphia teachers would be able to assist the Educating for American Democracy initiative, writing curriculum units that would be great resources, not just for themselves and their students, but for educators around the country who inevitably would adapt them and use them in ways that are appropriate to their own context. But Philadelphia is so crucial to America's historic experience and development, and the different communities that have made up Philadelphia, including what was often the nation's leading African-American community from the 18th century through the present. There are stories to tell about American democracy, its history, its strengths, its weaknesses, achievements and shortcomings that we can tell from Philadelphia in a way that is more compelling than can be done in most other locations. So I'm hoping and confident that the teachers in the seminar will write curriculum units that will be of great value, not just for their students, essential as that is, but also for helping teachers around the country meet the very great political challenges facing Educating for American Democracy in this time. And my seminar coordinator is Tim Woods, and I'm not going to put him on the spot, but I'm very grateful that he's playing this role. I led a number of seminars at Yale before I came to Penn, where I've led several, as Edward said, and I have always been grateful for the contributions the coordinators provide. And so I'm looking forward to a challenging, but I think exciting and very worthwhile semester in TIP this year.
Thank you, Rogers. And the next seminar is Soft Robots, which will be led by Cynthia Sung, Professor of Mechanical Engineering and Applied Mechanics at Penn. This is Cynthia's second seminar, and she's also a University Advisory Council member. Her coordinator is Catherine Steiner.
Great, thanks, Edward. I'm so excited to be here and to see all of you. I'm really excited that we're going to be having this seminar on soft robotics this semester. We're at a really exciting time for robotics right now. Robotics is an engineering discipline that started back in the 1950s when people were interested in automating work that could be done in factories. And that was really the start of looking at robotic technology and how we could get machines to help humans do work. At this point in time, robots have made it into a lot of different areas, not only the factory, but you're starting to see robotic technologies in supermarkets. I don't know if you all have been to downtown, the giant downtown in Philadelphia, but there's this robot that goes down the aisles and leads you to different products if you ask it for help. We're seeing robots in hospitals who are helping to deliver drugs to patients. And so robots are really starting to integrate into society. And we're starting to see a really big transition now to thinking not just about these rigid robots that are made of metal and have these forms that you normally think about for robots on the factory floor, but soft robots. And the transition to soft robots has been brought about by really three major innovations in engineering. One of which is just that robotics as a field has developed now that we can understand a lot of the core problems that have to do with how does a machine interact with an environment, and how does it think about and control itself and plan to interact with that environment. There have been huge innovations in fabrication, where now we can make really complicated structures. The new work in 3D printing, in textile manufacturing, in just all sorts of mass manufacturing technologies allow us to make very, very interesting geometries, structures with very interesting mechanical behaviors, and also a huge innovation in active and smart materials, where now we don't have to just think about how do we put a DC motor on a robot to get it to move, but actually how do we integrate materials that can sense, materials that can act, and materials that really move in ways that are similar to muscle structures from biology. So the combination of all of these innovations and technology have allowed us to start thinking about, well, what if we can take a robot now and start to make it soft? These types of robots have a lot of advantages. In particular, they would be safe for people to interact with because they're soft. They can integrate more directly into human life. Imagine if your clothes could sense and help you keep track of things. And they can help robots to become more robust. So actually now we're seeing a lot of companies and research in this space. Amazon annually has a picking challenge where they try to get robots, many of which are soft, to figure out how to pick objects off of shelves in their warehouse. Google has started a new project in wearables where they're trying to embed conductive threads into clothing so that the clothes can help you keep track maybe of when you need to do laundry, for example. A lot of examples like that, where we're starting to see robotic technology transition from this traditional form into these new materials and these new shapes and these new types of structures. So in this seminar, we're going to be looking at the different aspects of soft robotics: design, fabrication, control, sensing, actuation. We're going to be doing some hands-on activities to see whether we can build a simple soft robot. And I'm really excited that this seminar is going to be able to bring this technology closer to the K through 12 level, because the students who are in your classes are really the ones who are going to be pushing this technology forward and making soft robots to have their real societal impact in the future. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to experiencing the seminar and learning from you about what problems you think are interesting in this space, sharing what I know about the technology. And I'm also very grateful to Catherine, who is going to be helping out with the seminar as well.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. And that concludes the public portion of our orientation for TIP's 2022 Spring Seminar Program. I would like to thank all the guests who attended, and I encourage you to keep abreast of news about TIP via our website, theteachersinstitute.org, and follow us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. And we wish you the best in your spring term.